Hello everyone, welcome back to Base Damage. Hope you're all doing well today. We're going to be going back over the whole issue that happened with the Bulgaria regionals again, and that's going to be the entirety of this particular video. The last video that I made for it, I actually asked somebody if anybody had gone to the regionals and to reach out to me, and through our wonderful network that is the Base Damage Discord, someone actually ended up doing so. They said they don't mind being named. They said they don't mind if I say their name or everything. It's Captain Ravuoli is their Discord name. I don't know their real name. That's totally cool. But I'm going to have something kind of playing in the background, just because I didn't want to show the conversation and everything, just kind of out of privacy and respect. Also, it gives me less editing to have to do. They said, I was part of the first team registered for Bulgaria, so he was following it from start, basically. The only issue that we had thought of this was time zones for recording stuff, and his accent. He said he wasn't certain if people would understand that, so we figured it was just better if I asked questions and he answered just via text. It just works out way better. Obviously, I'm going to read everything verbatim. So let's get right into it. So obviously, I just gave him a massive list of questions. I'm just going to kind of bounce between the question and answer as we go along. So obviously, the first thing, I asked him was hey, can I use your name? They're like, go for it. So the biggest thing was, we know that there were 9 players who ended up participating, but were there more that showed up? And just to elaborate really quick before I read out the answer to this, the fact, the issue with Bulgaria was the fact of this was supposed to be a teams match, but they had banned so many sets from being used. It ended up being one of the most piss poor turnouts that I've ever seen, and I've brought attention to it, and we're gonna get into some other questions later on that kind of solidifies that this is an issue that needs to be discussed, and we'll talk about that in just a second here. But so because there was only 3 teams that showed up, meaning only 9 players showed up, they're like, well, we can't do teams. We're just gonna do what is essentially a locals. They basically turned it to single matches like you would for Fall Fest, not Spring Fest. So let's get right into it. So I said, were there more that showed up? That is to ask, did more players get turned away for not having the appropriate sets to be able to play? Because like I said, there was 14 sets that got banned basically because of distribution reasons, copyright reasons, whatever. So obviously, so to go down to their answer. There were only 9 Weiss players that showed up total. I was team 1 to register on the day the event went live on Bushinavi, and there wasn't another team registered for around 2 weeks leading up to the event. It says in parentheses, Team 3 didn't register at all because by this point, we knew the event was going to be changed to singles. He said, I don't know how things work in the US, but we knew who the head judge was and had reached out to ask, and he confirmed if we didn't have the required 8 teams to fire off trios, it would be changed to singles on the day if we had at least 8 people for singles. So that's one thing I didn't actually know for teams, and that's just out of ignorance for not reading the rules. I didn't know that we had to have 8 teams minimum for the tournaments to fire off as a team tournament. I actually didn't know that, and now that I've been educated on that, that's something I'm going to be trying to be mindful of in the future. At least that is on the EU side, and I'm going to assume it probably is for over here as well. I'll double check after this and everything. So that's basically the thing, is because of so many decks got banned, so many series got banned, you couldn't play anything. It was just there was people who just had no reason to rock up. So next came in the question of how many players got turned away. Did someone rock up and they go, you can't actually play this deck, and they go, well, I don't have anything else, and left. That's what I thought would be a potentiality, but he said 0 players were turned away on the day. All players showed up with legal decks, but some had to borrow decks from other people, in order to be able to play. So technically all 3 of my team were playing borrowed decks, and that's a funny story for later if needed. I might hit you up on that one. The next question being, I'm assuming this same event had Cardfight Vanguard and probably Shadowverse going on as well. Can you recall if those two had bigger turnouts and player counts by comparison, or were they similar? If you can't recall, no worries. So he said, quote, Vanguard had a much bigger turnout. Can't remember exact numbers, but it was an alright sized event. As the store which was supporting the Bushiroad Springfest in that area only did Vanguard, and there was no imposed ban list on Vanguard. They had like one set, but I think it was like when he says imposed ban list, I mean where the 14 series were not allowed. Vanguard had like one set by comparison, but I think it was a brand spanking new set that they couldn't use yet. Shadowverse also had exactly 9 players and fired as singles as well. So that kind of answers another thing I didn't know is, did those two also do teams? Apparently that would have also fired off as teams, but we know from looking at the quote-unquote ban list that Bulgaria had, Shadowverse didn't have anything restricted. They just didn't have people show up, which is a different thing altogether. The Weiss players had a fucking reason not to show up. I'm wondering what the reason for Shadowverse was. All right, so the next thing I asked was, obviously you went expecting to play teams. What were your thoughts when they said we're switching it up to 1 versus 1 now? Which, as he stated before, they had talked to the head judge. But this was a thing. This was what he said, and I also told him for any of these questions to elaborate on them as much as he wanted. My original plan was to field a team from the UK, as Bulgaria looked relatively cheap to fly to, and accommodation was also cheap. Managed to get 2 other UK players who were down to play. One was a Quince player and a Hololive player, so their decks were banned. They had to borrow other decks. The Quince player borrowed a Slime deck, and the Hololive player borrowed his Chainsaw Man deck. This felt fine for trios, as I'd been cooking around with Bang Dream and had a list with a really favorable matchup into Spy, Slime, and Chainsaw Man, which were what I was expecting to see a lot for those trios since most of the other good sets were banned. A couple weeks before the event, we knew it was going to be swapping to singles, and I didn't want to play Bang Dream for singles when I felt like there was a chance for me to win if I just borrowed someone else's Chainsaw Man deck, so I did that instead. I'm assuming the other Chainsaw Man player swapped around to something, or when they knew it was going to be singles, he just continued using that Chainsaw Man deck, and both of them did. As much as I cooked Bang Dream, Chainsaw Man just had more text on all of its cards. Very accurate, my dude. So continuing into this, I asked, did the prize support change, or was it still the typical regional prizes? Said, prize support didn't really change, however, the first place team would only get 1 Anya promo, as it was 1 player instead of the 3. Apparently, the other 2 were meant to be destroyed by the tournament organizers to protect the integrity of the event. That actually kind of hurts. And I'll see if I can find a picture of the Anya promo. If I can, it'll be on screen right now. Which is, like I said, the given out for the regional stuff. This is interesting that they just destroyed the other prize cards. Because because technically for those prize cards, there's a fewer number of those in the world now. I don't think it's going to really impact it too terribly much, because it's only 2. But I mean, if this happens every single time, that's kind of crazy. So let's see. Let's go to the next one. Did the tournament organizers looked shocked by this low of a turnout, being only 9 players? So their answer was, so the issue with the tournament organizers over here is another story. Blackfire, who runs the distribution and planning of our events, are notoriously bad and didn't seem to care about most things. The tournament organizer forgot to bring the prize medals, so they had to be posted later, and I had to follow up with their support as to where it was, and then go on a wild goose chase to find it, as it wasn't delivered to me, and not delivered to the location they said it was. But most of our EU judges are very passionate players and active within the community, so the judges knew this was going to happen long before the day. So, and this isn't me trying to put him on the spotlight, but I will completely agree with what Ravioli said. That being, the EU judges are very passionate, and from what I've seen talking to Weiss and Chill, who is a judge and over in the EU, I can tell he's extremely passionate about that, so I believe this statement 100%. So, it's just real, and so to even kind of follow up of how people just, how do I put this? It's really crazy for something else coming up here in a moment. Well, I know it's the very next question. Sorry, I had to scroll up. The overall reaction seems to be, oh, it's Europe. This thing happens all the time. From Ravioli had said something similar, as well as people who commented on the last video about Bulgaria. We had easily 2 or 3 other people, like, all saying this happens all the time. And even something Ravioli said was, it's kind of crazy that it took this to happen for, people in America to give a shit. And that kind of makes me feel bad, but at the same time, it's true. I've been covering this kind of stuff for like the better part of 6 or 7 years at this point. Outside of obviously what happened during COVID and everything. But I've been covering this for so long that it felt really weird that to hear, oh yeah, this has been going on. And I'm going, y'all just talk about, y'all, like, this must be talked about on Twitter, where I just don't, like, look at stuff on Twitter. I don't have a Twitter, so I don't give a fuck about it. So it makes me question, like, how much of this stuff is, like, publicly advertised or talked about, or does Bushi even kind of shut it down? I'm kind of concerned with, like, if I'm going to get any backlash talking about all this stuff with Bulgaria involving Bushiroad. So I said, feel free to comment more on this particular topic if you want to elaborate. And oh boy, did he elaborate. And we got like 3 nice paragraphs. Actually, no, I asked one other question, which was if Bushiroad or whoever the tournament organizers were, did they offer any kind of apology or compensation for it being such a low turnout? So that's going to be included in this, and it's like the very last paragraph. So the first paragraph, elaborating. My understanding of how North America distribution works is if the set is released, every shop in NA can purchase it. This isn't the case with Europe, as not all regions get the license to sell every set, which caused the absolute shit show of a ban list in Bulgaria. His words and mine. Let me put it that way. Other events have similar issues, and this was blown to a new extreme with this. The only real example I can give you is buy a set from your local game shop in Florida. Everything goes well. You play your Bushiroad Springfest there, decide to go to another one in Ohio, for example. But Ohio wasn't allowed to sell that set, so now you aren't allowed to play it in Ohio. But put that across almost all the states having random, 1 or 2 missing sets, and just hope they aren't meta relevant. That's basically EU in a nutshell. EU events also feel like they're held in weird places sometimes. While I don't mind traveling to an event, hosting your Bushiroad Springfest in Bulgaria, which doesn't support two-thirds of the games, being Weiss and Shadowverse, which are at the event, is a weird call by the tournament organizers / Bushi. Our French Bushiroad Springfest is held in, and forgive me for butchering this, Mauvaise? If I'm mispronouncing that, I'm so sorry. Which is awkward for a lot of people to get to. Even last year, Bushiroad Springfest Austria was held within a school. That I did not know. That's actually kind of crazy to me. So, continuing to the next one. I'm unsure how many players chose not to travel based on the ban set in place. There isn't a large number of UK players who travel consistently, and the longer flights for a narrow ban list event was possibly a turnoff, as a lot of the players here had picked up Spy, but wouldn't be able to fill a team of just 3 Spy family. With things like Hololive and Quince being out of the picture, I don't think anyone else even tried to field a team from the UK. The other 2 teams which went for Weiss were both Austrian teams. One is a more competitive team with players that aim to travel to most events, but the other is more a group of players which I would say travel for the love of the game more than anything. This includes the 3rd place Batman Ninja player, so shoutouts to them. But that's just my take on it, as I see them at a lot of the events, but haven't spoken to them much. As for the compensation that I had also asked about, there was 0 compensation at all for the event or any kind of apology at all. I'd looked at canceling flights and accommodations, but nothing was refundable, so we decided if the event didn't fire, we just have the weekend in Bulgaria, as it was still relatively cheap. Standards are set so low by Bushi here, I don't think anyone expected an apology or even mention of the event, or event mentioned of the event. In all honesty, I'm lucky I even got my medal for 2nd place. It was only this year that the 1st place team from London, Bushiroad Springfest, got their 3rd Alice PR. Okay, so he's stating the people who, like, it was because this has happened like last year, where they had a Alice promo. It took no, not last year. They said Bushiroad Springfest of 2022. Bushi is just so bad for getting prizes to them. Apparently, they said the first place team for London in 2022 just got their extra set of Alice promos this year. Took 2 years. It had quote unquote been lost, and it took 2 years of chasing it for it to finally be given to the appropriate winner. That's actually insane. So, not even counting, compensation or apologies, they're not even good at giving out their own fucking they're not even good at giving out their own prize support. Just from reading over this, and I'm sorry, like I said, I'm not going to show the actual conversation just out of respect and privacy, because there was some other stuff that was stated, but not in relation to answering the question. So that is between me and him. But yeah, I just really could not believe that. I just really could not believe how this has been going on for so long for the EU side, when they just, like, nobody's talking about it. In all my years of playing Weiss, this is really the first time this has ever been extremely pointed out to me. And I'm going to try, like, me as a content creator, I'm going to be trying to look into this way more often and try to do what I can do to try to shed light on this kind of thing more often and try to keep my finger closer to the pulse, as so to speak. But here's the thing, and this is going to be my closing thoughts for this. I've been told, like, having been told that this is something that the tournament organizers knew about this so far in advance, but nothing was done about it. It feels like. How do I put this? If they tried to do something for it, it doesn't feel like anything was actually accomplished. It makes me question how much they actually pushed for it, or if even the tournament organizers are already so complacent in in the mindset of, this is just the way it is. It has to be this way, meme from fucking Metal Gear. I really don't think the EU players should let this be is this an American thing of just thinking you should fight for this harder? You should try to express your concern. How do I put this? If I'm going to be trying to, like, point out information for, like, the events so far ahead in advance from now on, and try to get stuff like that's crazy like this being spread and talked about more often, I really think that the players need to speak up about this and go, hey, don't host your events in places where we can't play what we want to play. It's one thing if it's like 1 or 2 sets. 14 sets is unrealistic and it's insane. It's so absolutely insane that they went, here's, this, you can play this, but 14 of the sets are banned, and think, I'm certain people will still want to show up for this. And big thank you to Ravioli for answering all my questions and trying to give me as much insight as possible. But I don't think anybody should have showed up for this. I think in the future, everyone should wait before they, like, book their flights and their accommodations and try to see, like, if the same thing happens again in the future. So before you, like, try to book your accommodations and book your flights and all that to go to this, if you're in the UK listening to this, I doubt that you are, but if you are, hold off next time before you plan your flights and stuff to see if this kind of stuff happens. We need to make a statement and need to, like, point this out to Bushi that we don't want to show up if this is what's going to happen. And I honestly think when this kind of stuff happens, all the players just need to not show up. I'm sorry also for the Shadowverse players that had exactly 9 people. I don't know what happened with y'all, but whatever. Once again, thank you to Captain Ravioli, and it is greatly appreciated for them to be able to answer my questions as much as possible. I'm really, really trying to get my thoughts together to try to think of something to really... I don't think anything that I can say is going to change players' minds. They're going to do what they want to because, you know, obviously they're not clicking that subscribe button down below. But let's just end it with that. I don't really know what else to say for this other than this was an absolute shit show. And I really, really hope Bushi learns from this. And I hope the mentality of the players changes. Just because right now you say, oh, this happens in Europe all the time. You shouldn't settle for this. You should not settle for this being the norm. And if that's like a weird mentality for you to wrap your head around, I don't know what to tell you. But thank y'all very much for watching. We'll see you on the flip side. Peace.